All right, folks, we talked about Project 2025 and exactly what it means, and it is going to have a devastating impact on Black America. But how much? Well, let's talk to Janai Nelson. She, of course, she's the president and director-counsel of the Legal Defense Fund, and she joins us right now from New York. Janai, always glad to have you here. We focus a lot on this during the election and trying to get people to understand how real this is. Republicans knew the impact, so what did they do? Oh, no, absolutely not. I mean, it has nothing to do with Donald Trump, and he disavows that. He said, I don't want to read it. Oh, he has his own Agenda 47. But the reality is we all knew he was lying, they were lying. Project 2025 is absolutely the hard right Republican agenda for America. I dare say it's the Newt Gingrich's contract for America 2.0.
You are not wrong, Roland. We knew from the very start that whoever picked up this playbook to dismantle democracy would do great harm to this country. And we took Donald Trump at his word. He said this wasn't his playbook. We analyzed it. We said whoever implements this would be doing a great disservice to the future of our multiracial democracy. And what we did at the Legal Defense Fund was translate Project 2025 into a report that people could digest, because remember, it's 900 plus pages. So we analyzed it, and we wanted specifically to point out what the impact would be for Black communities. Of course, we hope that would never come to pass. But now that we have an administration about to be installed in January, we know that those threats have now become real, and at least we know what they are, and we are prepared to counter them and disrupt them and defend against them with every possible tool in our arsenal.
So obviously there's a legal front that exists there, but let's also be honest. When he was last there were more than 200 federal judges that were appointed. You have a hostile Supreme Court, frankly, a right-wing Supreme Court. You now have Republicans controlling the House, the Senate, controlling the presidency. And then, of course, you also have Republicans controlling state legislatures and all the things that are happening there. And I think that what has to from my vantage point, what people need to understand the assault on the federal workforce, the assault on programs, whether it's education, whether it's environmental, the absolute assault on civil rights. We already see in terms of where they stand and what they're talking about when it comes to DEI. They want to get rid of every program that, and it's not like they've been the greatest in the world for Black people, but the programs that have allowed for us to be able to increase economically, educationally in society, they want to wipe all those programs out. And so people need to understand that this is not just a Trump thing. This is literally an effort that they want to institute federal, state, county, city, school district, and we're already seeing it happen in Texas colleges, Florida colleges, how they also are going after what's happening in corporate America. This is a wholesale assault on frankly, the apparatus that has been beneficial to Black folks and other minorities.
That's absolutely right. We are going to be battling on every single front at the federal level, which we know they are stacked against us because there's complete control of Congress forthcoming. The next Congress, the 119th, will be an extremist Congress. It will also have, though, the first two Black women senators, Senator Also Brooks and Senator Blunt Rochester, who will be serving for the first time. I want to make sure that we don't forget some of the gains that we've made along the way and the power that we can exert. But the reality is that Congress is locked up by conservative extremists, and we need to recognize that the ability to get the legislation needed passed that will preserve our democracy is now extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, which means that our game at the state level and local levels needs to be aggressive. We need to mobilize. We need to organize. We need to understand every lever of power at state and local levels, and not to give up the fight at the federal level. We saw today, for example, that when we push back on extremist, unqualified, sycophantic nominees like the one, Matt Gaetz, who was suggested to become the next U.S. Attorney General, that with enough pressure and enough exposure about the weaknesses of these nominees, we can force their hand, and Matt Gaetz withdrew. And that's very important because the bar has been set so very low that President-elect Trump believes he can put almost anyone in charge of our most important federal agencies. And if you had any regrets about the way you went forward with your vote to install a new government that's hostile to democracy, you need to be standing up right now and demanding qualified nominees for our agency cabinet members who care about the rule of law, who will uphold civil rights, and who will uphold the Constitution. I have not seen a single nominee that fits that bill and who is actually qualified to be part of our federal government leadership.
You talked about not giving the fight up on the federal level, but I do want to go back and talk about the state level. And the reason I want to talk about that is because I don't think people really understand why, from a legal standpoint, why these state Supreme Courts matter. So we just saw in this election gains with the Kentucky Supreme Court, the Michigan Supreme Court. Allison Riggs is holding on to her seat on North Carolina Supreme Court. Anita Earls is going to be up for re-election in 2026. But in 2028, there are 3 Supreme Court seats in North Carolina. If folks focus on that, literally, that court could flip back Democrat. Now, how does that now impact it? Well, when the Democrats control the North Carolina Supreme Court, they ruled against political gerrymandering. It used to be Republicans had a 10-3 advantage on the congressional level. It then went to 7-7. Republicans now control it. It went back to 10-3. That's 4 seats. Those 4 seats are how the Republicans have the majority, how they control the House, just that one state. You now go to Wisconsin. We saw what happened when the Democrat won in Wisconsin for the state Supreme Court race. There's another seat, that's an open seat that's up in April. And so I think while people are sitting here and being, despondent and people are just upset, angry, and sad, what I keep saying is you can't listen. The next presidential race isn't until 2028. The next congressional race isn't until 2026. We need to be thinking, and as you said, mobilizing and organizing around these crucial state races and do pickups here, here, here to understand how you begin to piece this thing back together, if you will.
No, you're absolutely right. We have got to be focused on state and local elections, and state legislatures matter. Governors matter. All of the elections up and down the ballot at the state and local levels are key. And you're right, the balance of power can tip in any direction. For our purposes at the Legal Defense Fund, we are not partisan, so we are not focused on which party has control. What we care about is Black voters having control of their destiny. And so we want to maximize political power for Black voters, primarily across the South and across the country, when they have an opportunity to build and amass political power, either through mobilizing and organizing or through changing the lines to make them fairer, as we did at the congressional level in the state of Alabama, where we secured a second Black opportunity district 2 years ago in the Supreme Court. And I'm so delighted to say that Black voters in Alabama voted in that congressional district, and they elected a candidate of their choice, Shamari Figures. That shows real power when we resist partisan and racial gerrymandering, or partisan gerrymandering that uses race as a vehicle. That's happening across the country. And we were successful in being able to push back against that at the Supreme Court. And that actually led to a second Black opportunity district in the state of Louisiana as well. So another Black congressperson, Cleo Fields, was elected as a result. And now I've been talking about the congressional level, but as you point out, state legislative districts matter as much. They matter as much. And in fact, Sometimes they can affect laws that impact our day-to-day life in ways that we feel more acutely than even the people in Congress or even who's president. And so we are actually at the Legal Defense Fund at trial this week as we speak, working to challenge the legislative districts in the state of Alabama. And so we've used our win, our Supreme Court win at the congressional level, to push for change in Arkansas, in Alabama, in Louisiana, in places across the South where there is burgeoning political power that just needs to be released and tapped through fair maps and the mobilizing of the vote. And so that is our focus. As well as the federal game, we have always got to focus on state and local elections because there's real power there.
And so, look, you're absolutely right, being nonpartisan. But look, you want judges, though, who believe in civil rights. Judges who don't fall for the okie doke when it comes to political gerrymandering. And I think the public needs to understand that when we are talking about the work that y'all do, it's a lot different when you have a judge, typically a Democrat elected or appointed judge, who is going to consider point of view, perspective, versus someone who goes, nope, political gerrymandering is great. Racial gerrymandering, we don't believe in it. We don't believe in systematic racism. So who sits in that seat
matters.
Determines Absolutely. How the law is applied.
No question about that. And we often talk about the federal judiciary, which is extremely important, but there is so much work happening in state courts, your criminal courts. Most prisoners, most people who are incarcerated or deal with the criminal legal system are dealing with it at the state level. Most people who are sentenced to capital punishment are sentenced at the state level. So many small claims and business claims and important state rights issues are litigated at the state level. So you are absolutely right that state courts matter. Those judges that you see on your ballot, and you may not know the names of those individuals, you need to look at them with as much care and consideration as you do the members of the Supreme Court. Because in your state, it's those trial court judges, it's those appellate judges and Supreme Court judges at the state level who will determine much of the issues that you will encounter as a resident of your state. And remember, most cases actually are adjudicated there. Very few cases go to the Supreme Court. In fact, the docket at the Supreme Court has been dwindling year to year for over a decade. So when we're talking about who's actually deciding issues to affect everyday life, we are talking about state judiciaries or federal judges at the trial court and appellate court levels. And that's another reason why we're focused not only on state judiciaries, but we are focused on the federal government. And we want to make sure that in the time we have left with the Biden administration, that we do not leave vacancies on the federal court, that we move forward the 23 pending nominees with as much swiftness as possible. We're very alarmed at the idea that there may be deals struck to suggest that we're going to give up any of those positions. We have no room to cede any bit of power in this moment because we need to preserve our democracy in order to advance and protect Black communities. That is the mandate. And anyone who stands in the way of that needs to be called to account.
You made this point earlier, and I go back to in terms of this war that we're in, 2009, which when I really began to focus on which is my book, White Fear, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Minds. I said we are the beginning stages of white minority resistance. And we're actually seeing that. We're seeing these election results. And I kept saying in speeches all across the country, folks, prepare yourself. We are about to be engaged in a 50-year war. And people were kind of like, yeah, okay, well, I hear. I'm like, no, I don't think you understand. But that was 2009. That was 15 years ago. We're now 15 years in, and we are in a war. We are in a battle. Biden kept talking about, fighting for the soul of America. We are in a battle against people who literally want to repeal the legislative and civil rights gains of the past 60 years. That is their absolute focus. The Federalist Society, when you look at a lot of these right-wing conservative think tanks, they have hated civil rights advances, legal advances, which is why they are so focused on these federal judicial appointments, because it was the federal courts, Brown 1, Brown 2, that really, not the Supreme Court, the lower courts, especially that Fifth Circuit, that really defined, the reading and the understanding of Brown versus Board of Education. And so our folks cannot, I just keep saying, we cannot tread lightly here and play games, because there is a well-funded adversary, Leonard Leo and these folks, who want to destroy all of the work of Thurgood Marshall and the LDF and the Lawyers Committee and all of these civil rights groups. That is their aim.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And, Roland, I want to go back to something you said earlier. This year, we are celebrating the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, which should remind everyone that it has only been a mere 3 generations that we have come out of the separate but equal doctrine, meaning state-sponsored segregation, Jim Crow, subjugation of Black people by state, local, and federal governments. That means in the lifetime of many people living, we were in an apartheid state. And as you said, we are now at war about the future of our democracy and whether we're going to retrogress or advance this multiracial democracy to fulfill its promise. And we cannot be in any way discouraged from that pursuit because certain things were not perfect or fulfilled. We know that the promise of Brown has not yet been fulfilled, but we don't want to go back to separate but equal. Not at all. We have work to do to perfect the promise of Brown. And like you said, DEI may not have been a perfect tool to give us the true equity, reparations, remediation that we deserve, but it was an important way of creating a pipeline to leadership, ensuring that we had an expansive view of merit, and to make sure that there was more of a level playing field on which to compete for opportunity and education and advancement. And we can't afford to say that those were not necessary and important tools that we must fight for simply because they were imperfect. The job is to perfect them. The job is to recognize where our frailties are, what more protections we need, what more opportunities we need to create, and build upon that progress, not allow extremists to take us back. And I want to commend to you, if you haven't seen it yet, some very powerful testimony from Representative Summer Lee that I saw earlier today, where she dissected the fear that you talk about, the fear of playing on a level playing field with people who have been historically marginalized, denied.
Yeah, we ran it yesterday. We ran the whole video yesterday. Excellent. Her and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett.
Excellent. She was fire. And it's important for people to recognize what that is. There are some who are so addicted to privilege, they're so addicted to prerogative, they don't realize that they have not been competing on merit for generations. And we're trying to change that. You take off the shackles, you remove the barriers and the impediments to opportunity, and there's no question in my mind that you will see diverse leadership, you will see the advancement of people of color, Black people, and other marginalized groups in this country in unprecedented ways. All we need is the opportunity to do it. And what we're seeing right now is a fear, and therefore there's a denial of the ability to continue this progress, but we're not going to let that happen. We're going to continue to push back at every possible level and using every possible lever.
All right, Janai Nelson of the LDF. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Roland.
Hi, I'm Isaac Hayes III, founder and CEO of Fanbase. Fanbase is a free to download, free to use, next generation social media platform that allows anyone to have followers and subscribers on the same page. Fanbase was built through investment dollars from equity crowdfunding from the Jobs Act. People just like you help build Fanbase, and we're looking for more people to help build Fanbase. We are currently raising $17 million in a Regulation 8 crowdfund on Start Engine. We've already crossed $2.1 million, but we're looking to raise more capital from people just like you that deserve the opportunity to invest in early stage startups without having to be accredited investors. So right now, I'd like you to go to startengine.com/fanbase and invest. The minimum to invest is $399. That gets you 60 shares of stock in Fanbase right now, today. And then use Fanbase to connect with friends, grow your audience, and be you without limits.